5. Project Resource Management. Now that we have some of the basics, we can get down to calculating the specifics of project resource management. Looking at the chart of number of programs that make up the system and the number of manpower required to make one program, what is the minimum number of necessary personnel required to develop a system within 64 days? So we have a limit. We want to get the system ready within 64 days. The system takes up some number of programs, so there is a number of programs that make up a system, and we are given the number of manpower that is required to make one program. We also must note that not only coding, but also the design and the testing of the program are required, and these will take 5 times the manpower that the coding takes. So you have the design and testing. The design could be possibly the user interface, and the testing is to see if there are any problems with it. We see a table here for how the system works. So we have for the input process that there are 20 programs that we must have for the input process. Now to create a single program, one single program, it takes 2 man days, and we'll explain what this means in the next slide. So to have one single program, it takes 2 man days, and we need 20 of them. So you can see there will be some kind of calculation which will be involved in this. The output process requires 10 programs, and it takes 7 man days for a single program in the output process. In the computation process, we need 5 programs, and it takes 10 man days for a single program in the computation process. Now the question is, what is the minimum number of necessary personnel? How many people do we need, the minimum required to develop a system within 64 days? The options are A, 14, B, 15, C, 16, or D, 17. And we'll go through the steps to try and calculate what the answer will be. Now, in project scope management, the units that we use for manpower for software development are man-hour, man-day, and man-month. They may sound like silly names, but they make quite a lot of sense. Man-hour, all it means is number of men times the time in hours. In other words, the amount of work one technician can produce in 1 hour. Man-day means the number of men times the time again, but this time the time is specified in days. In other words, the amount of work one technician can produce in 1 day. Man-month means the number of men times the time. In other words, man-month measures the amount of work one technician can produce in 1 month. In simple terms, 4 man-month in a given situation means to complete the task with 1 man, 4 months are required. And this may take a little bit of getting used to, but once you get used to it, this is a fairly simple concept. Likewise, it means to complete the same task, it would take 2 men, 2 months, or 4 men, 1 month. And you can see how you can convert between the different scenarios. So now let's get down to answering the question by doing the following calculations. Now we must note that we are given in the question that the design and the testing requires 5 times the manpower for coding. So we have to remember that we have to take the programming and then we must move on to design and test. So we can't forget that we need to design and test also. So let's begin. We are given in the question this box. We're given in this box. We've given the number of programs it takes for each process and the number of manpower it takes to create one program of each process. Let's begin with the input process. In the input process, there are 20 programs that need to be done. Now to code one single program, it takes 2 man days. Even without understanding what the unit represents, we can do some simple calculations. If there are 20 programs that we need to do, and it takes 2 man days to do one program, then we can simply do 20 times 2, because there are 20 programs that needs to be done, and it takes 2 to do one. So we do 20 times 2, which is 40. So the manpower to code all programs of the input process takes 20 times 2 is equal to 40 man days. And you can see that we do the same with the rest in this column. For the output processes, there are 10 programs that require to be run, or required to be programmed, and it takes 7 man days to code one program of the output process, and so we need to do 10 of them, so we simply do 7 times 10, which is 70. It requires 70 man days to do the output process. This is simply just for the coding, remember. And we do the same thing for the computation process. We need to do 5, and it takes 10 man days to do 1, so we just do 5 times 10, which is 50. So we have a subtotal. If we total them up, we have 40 plus 70 plus 50. That's 90 plus 70, which is 160. So it takes 160 man days to code all of the programs in all of the processes. Now we have to remember that we are not finished. We've done the programming bit, but we also have to design and test. Now we have to design and test each of the programs in each of the processes. So it says in the question that the design and the testing requires 5 times the manpower for coding. So if it takes 2 man days to code one program in the input process, then what does that mean? How much manpower does it take to design and test? Well, the design and testing takes 5 times the manpower of coding, so to design and test an input process, we have to do 2 times 5. It takes 5 times the manpower that it takes for programming, which is 2 times 5 is 10. And then if we do 10 times 20, you will find that you get 200. And you can repeat this calculation with every single process that you have in your system, and you find that it takes 200 to design and test the input process. It takes 350 to design and test the output process, and it takes 250 to design and test the computation process, which subtotals up to 800. In fact, by the way, you can see that 160 times 5 is 800 over here. So we verified that this is 5 times more than the manpower that it takes to code. And of course, we must add the two processes together, add the two sections together, which gives us 160 plus 800, which is 960 man days. So then we find that the total man required to complete the project in 64 days, we have that it takes 960 men 1 day to complete the project, or it takes 960 days for 1 man to complete the project. If we want to complete the project in 64 days, then we can see from the units that we need to divide by the days. So if we're going to do in 64 days, then all we need to do is do 960 man days divided by 64 days, and we see that the days cancel, and then we do the fraction, which is 960, which is 64 over 64, which gives us 15, and that leaves us with 15 men. So it would take minimum 15 men to complete this project within 64 days. So we know then that the minimum Minimum number of men from the manpower that we calculated, which was 960, the minimum number of men required is 15 men to complete the project within 64 days. So then we know that the answer is option B, 15.